Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another episode of All About Art. In this episode, I sat down with Bibi Zavieh, founder of newcube.art, an artist platform and art advisory. I speak to Bibi about her experiences at Christie's auction house and ArtNet before she ventured into entrepreneurship and launched newcube right before COVID lockdowns. I ask her about how she works with both artists as well as collectors and how this new business model fits into the art ecosystem. We delve into what it means to collect art today, to gain art market expertise, and develop a quote-unquote eye, and so much more. Thank you, Bibi, for coming on the podcast. Before we dive into the episode, I want to take a minute of your time to mention that All About Art is on Patreon. We are mostly volunteer-led, but in order to cover running costs and other expenses, we make it possible for our lovely listeners to support us, ranging from £1 a month to the price of an oat latte a month, or on the higher end, the price of a Sunday brunch per month, depending on the tier you want to choose. If every person who listens to the podcast signed up for the £1 tier on our Patreon, we would be able to sustain the podcast while also having scope to produce episodes more frequently and expand our activities in demystifying the professional arts sector. So, if you want to receive early access to episodes and behind-the-scenes content, maybe you want to get some merch, or if you just love what we do and want to support us, I would be thrilled if you considered signing up. The link to the Patreon is in the show notes. And now, on to the interview. Also, thank you to our sponsors at Synergy Associates, the art world tech gurus, for supporting this episode's production at their clubhouse on Pall Mall. You can find more about Synergy and their facilities in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast, Bibi.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. Rainy, a little bit wet from the weather, but, we move. New York is similar to London in that way.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. For context, for any listeners, we are sitting in an apartment in New York City. Bibi has offered the place that she's staying as the place that we can record the episode, which is part and parcel of traveling to record podcast episodes, which is quite fun. But Bibi, to start us off, I would love for you to tell listeners about your background. Can you tell me more about how you developed your career? What did you study and what experiences did you gain in the arts before founding newcube? And also, may I ask, is it newcube.art? Should I make sure to say that as the full name, or is it called newcube when we're speaking in conversation?
We could just say newcube, but later on I will also make a difference between newcube.art and newcube advisory. But in general, newcube is totally fine. So thank you so much again, Alexandra, for having me. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, so it's an honor to be a part of it. And I will just tell you a little bit more about myself. So I actually grew up surrounded by very artsy people. My mother is an architect. My father is a decorative arts dealer. And he's been a decorative arts dealer for almost 50 years at this point. And so I kind of really grew up in the art world. And when I had to decide on what studies to start, I wanted to do art history. So that's what I did. I'm an art historian by training. I studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. And very early on, I knew that my passion lied around contemporary art. So I did curatorial studies with a focus on contemporary art. And then I started working in galleries in Paris. And from then on, I worked with a private collector who was a famous filmmaker called Claude Berry in Paris. And one thing leading to another, I started working at Christie's in 2019, which made me move to London. So Christie's was really where the bulk of my career really happened and my career was shaped. I was there for nearly a decade. I am still very close to the team there. A lot of us have kind of moved on to other auction houses or other places in the art world, but we're still pretty much in touch. So that's great. It feels like a big family. From then, I moved over to ArtNet. It was right at the time when the art world was shifting to a lot of things happening online, and ArtNet just felt like a great move for me. So that led me to move to New York. And a couple years into ArtNet, I decided that I wanted to take a leap of faith and start my own platform and advisory. And so that's where newcube started at the early 2020. And now here we are in 2025 and it's still going. So it's been great.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk to you more about like what it takes to found a company and what newcube is. But before we delve deeper into newcube itself, you just mentioned you have experience in various organizations, having worked at Christie's, ArtNet, and more. And I'm sure that, for example, being head of sale for the post-war and contemporary department at one of the world's biggest auction houses looked very different to your position, which I think you had the same title at ArtNet, but I'm sure that that was a very different job and is also very different to your role as founder of newcube today. So I would love to know how your past experiences define how you approach your work today and in what ways they were different, but maybe also similar.
Absolutely. I think Christie's was, as I was mentioning earlier, it really taught me all the basic ways of working in the art world. One thing that was very important at Christie's was really everything that's around due diligence. And so I learned a lot about how things work in terms of just making sure that provenance is correct, that authenticity has to require a lot of research, that we need to be very careful with details. It made me, I think I was, to begin with, pretty detail-oriented, but it really made me very much pay attention to details in terms of text and writing and research and all of those things. And obviously, Christie's being the leading auction house, the network of collectors and curators and people that I met there was just really, really great. And like I was saying earlier, I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. So I think it was really grounding in the sense that it made me enter the art world from the best place, really. ArtNet, everything was very different in the sense that because they're auctions, I was working in the auction department at ArtNet. So everything is online. You don't get to see as many artworks because a lot of the collectors who sell their works don't need to ship the works prior. So you're working based on images versus actually working on the artworks themselves physically. So that was very different. But then thankfully, having had the experience of Christie's, and I always thought that is probably one of the reasons why they wanted me to work at ArtNet, is that having the prior experience at Christie's made me really cautious and made me lead the sales and in the way that I could also train the team to make sure that the due diligence is done right and the processes are in place to make ArtNet kind of step up the game with their auctions. So that was really, I say, something that kind of flew nicely between the two. One thing I forgot to mention is that when I was at Christie's, I actually lived 5 years in Dubai and I was heading the modern contemporary Middle Eastern sales. And so that was also in its own way a really fulfilling experience because it was a market where everything was in a shifting mode. Everything was happening right at the center of the town. And there were a lot of new collectors, a lot of new spaces opening. Everything was really shifting in that market. And I think that in a way was probably the base of my work at newcube in the sense that I started working with emerging markets and emerging artists. And that really helped everything else from then on, really.
Yeah. And how did that sort of, because you just said, your experience in Dubai defined how you started to work with emerging markets and artists. And also, I think that probably getting that experience with due diligence and being really meticulous in knowing these processes probably really is a positive attribute that you were able to gain. You are very detail oriented, but then learning that and solidifying that throughout like a decade of work, right? That probably is something that really defines how you approach your company today, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I think there is, being an art historian, we always laugh actually about this, is like there's, the art world is really interesting. And there are a lot of people who, end up being advisors or end up being in the art world just by pure passion. And that's totally fine. But I think I've always been proud to say that I've actually, and I know you're also an art historian, so I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say, is that having that background, that educational and academic background, actually, I think really adds a lot of value to everything we do. I'm not saying we're necessarily better than anyone else, but, there is this academic approach that is really important. And in a way, I think at Christie's, although it's not academic, it's very commercial. the people that are hired there and the people that work there do really appreciate that side of things. And so I think that's something not to live aside and to kind of always remember. In terms of thinking of how the due diligence that I learned from my previous experiences helped with newcube, I think one of the main points is when working with artists or collectors, you want to make sure that you really get into conversations that delve into the details of everything. So details of what they like, details of what their work is about. And I think that really possibly is very much appreciated by the people that I work with. And I always say that my clients in a way are both artists and collectors. And so in very different ways, it's important to pay attention to what makes them different from one another.
Yeah. And that's where like due diligence is not just these like facts of, okay, where are your funds coming from? Or what's the provenance of XYZ? It's very much also, as you say, like delving into the more, I don't know if I would even say more emotional side of things, but just using your art historical knowledge and ability to be able to assess something via visual analysis. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is being able to assess something via visual analysis and also market analysis. So it's bridging that and bringing those together with newcube. And so can you tell me a bit more about newcube and its structure? You know, how does it function within the art ecosystem as a marketplace and also as an advisory?
Absolutely.
And I guess, you know, just being a little bit more specific with my question, because when we talk about art entrepreneurship, when we talk about entrepreneurship in general, it's also this question of what gap did you see in the market? So like, what gap was it that you saw in the arts that you wanted to fill by starting this business?
So it's very interesting because when I started thinking about launching newcube, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't really sure what shape and form it was going to take. I knew that I was starting to feel a little frustrated. It was, 2019, what we call ultra contemporary artists were really booming. Collectors were really buying quite extensively of younger artists. There was almost a sort of bubble into a bubble at the time. Exactly, which, I was born in 1986, so I fully relate to that generation. And that was, for me, the most exciting part is that I'm actually working with people who are in my age range, and I could relate with them, I could talk to them, I could meet them, I could build, friendships and relationships with them. And the same with collectors, really. But so at the time, there was a real appetite, fast growing, for ultra contemporary artists. And I was receiving a lot of wish lists from collectors. And at some point, I started going around these wish lists and realizing, oh my God, everybody's looking for the same artist. And they're all looking for the next hot artist. Everyone thinks they are just, ahead of their game. But actually, these wish lists are almost all the same. And so I started getting a little frustrated by that, thinking there are so many talents out there, but it's just the same names. And I won't name the artists because it's not to say that they weren't talented. They were, but it was starting to be frustrating for me. And I'm pretty much of a quiet and calm person, but I realized at some point I got a little angry at one of my clients who was a closer collector. And I was saying, I expect more of you. You could just go and see other artists and discover why are you buying what everyone's buying? Why are you buying with your ears?
Oh God, I'm sorry. I love this. Why are you buying with your ears and not your eyes?
Yeah.
I love that. I'm sorry that like really describes a lot of the art market sometimes.
That is unfortunate, but yes.
But I love that you said that.
I surprised myself because obviously I didn't mean to be rude to anybody, but I realized, okay, my frustration has reached a point where I really need to act upon it. And so that's when I started thinking, okay, I want to start working more with artists. And, I'm surrounded by artist friends and friends of friends. And so a lot of these artists were coming to me for advice. And I thought, okay, let me just try to make this a little more official. And so the idea of newcube initially was to really try to guide these younger artists. A lot of them had just freshly graduated from school and, they have a studio while they're in school. And then once they graduated, they're kind of left out in the wild. And usually they don't even have a studio anymore. A lot of them have to move back home. And it's just, everything is really difficult for them. And then, most of these artists are really looking to have exhibitions and looking to make money because that's how they live. And so, unfortunately, I could see a lot of these artists being a little bit taken advantage from by collectors, galleries, dealers here and there. And a lot of them were maybe in a rush to kind of get to the point they wanted to get. And so they would make decisions that, weren't necessarily the best ones. And so I stepped in with newcube initially by saying, okay, I'm just going to put in together sort of mentorship and a little bit of guidance for these artists. And so I started with a few artists who were all pretty young or early in their careers. And I would create what I called community chats. So I would bring all these artists together, and COVID happened in the meantime. So obviously everything kind of shifted very fast to online, which in a way actually made things easier. I worked with artists around the world, a lot in Europe, in the US. These guys didn't know each other for a lot of them, but I would create these chats online where I would bring different people from the art industry to come and talk to these artists, and these artists to talk in, between them and share advices and tips and things like that. And I would help them price. I would make sure they get contracts whenever things are happening with galleries. So it was just really a bit of a casual guidance. And with time and with COVID happening, it made sense to also help with sales. And so that's when the idea of the marketplace came together. And obviously it's a time when everybody was sitting at home.
Yeah. Were you still at ArtNet at the time?
No, I had just left ArtNet. And the couple of weeks before I left, I was starting to have this project in mind, and I was talking to a collector who very kindly really encouraged me to make the big move. And so that was really interesting. And actually, coincidentally, I was also in talks with Christie's to perhaps go back to them. So I was in a place where I was like, okay, something needs to change, but I don't know what. And thanks to this collector who really pushed me, I took the leap of faith, started newcube, and then COVID hit right then. And so I left around the same time. But in a way, I was very scared, obviously, when COVID happened. But I think I had a lot of beginner's luck. And you probably remember that a lot of these collectors were sitting at home. A lot of them were bored. A lot of them were genuinely looking to support the artists who had no way of showing their works or making money anymore. And so it happened to just be a very active time for me. And I was able to connect a lot of these collectors to young artists. And in a way, I couldn't be happier. That's what I was trying to do. And so it worked really well in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, collecting art during COVID was something that I think a lot of people wanted to do because they wanted to enliven their living space.
Absolutely.
Because, we were sitting at home and it's like, well, I can't stare at my empty wall any longer. And it just brings so much joy, personality, dynamism to someone's home.
That's true.
When they can collect art by someone. Because art is... I collect art personally, and I think I have a little bit too much on my walls. I'm not going to lie to you, in my tiny, tiny apartment in London. But every time I come home and every time I get up in the morning and I'm just like, oh,
it feels good.
It feels really good. I love having art around me. It makes me really happy. So I can imagine, yes. And I do remember a lot of collectors talking about that. I remember, oh my God, getting on Clubhouse. Do you remember that app?
Yes. Oh my God.
Did we talk about this when we were on our Zoom call back?
I feel like we mentioned it being such a cool thing, such a cool platform. It didn't really survive, did it?
It did not survive at all. And also, I'm kind of glad that it didn't survive, not because it wasn't a cool platform, because it was, but because for some reason during COVID, I pressured myself so much to be everywhere all at once as much as I could in the online sphere. So I would sometimes stay up until like 2 or 3 in the morning on Clubhouse talks and doing different things, trying to meet people. And I was going a bit nutty with trying to, connect with people for my career and things like that.
So we must have met on Clubhouse at the time then, perhaps.
Perhaps. Maybe we did.
Yeah, maybe we did.
Yeah, maybe we did.
Yeah.
I'm going to look back and see if I have archives of talks that we've attended to see if we did.
It would make sense if we did. I mean, I guess the circles are all intertwined.
It's actually a very tiny world.
It is.
When you look at it from afar. It's kind of funny.
And then in parallel to that, so the premise to newcube was really helping the artists and slowly getting into the marketplace idea and everything. And obviously working with collectors who are already collecting, that was one big part of it. But then I was also at an age where a lot of people around me were getting at a stage in their careers where they were making decent money. They had some disposable income. They were moving into their new serious adult home. They also started to express a desire to look at artists and see, you built a collection.
That's true.
It's not really about how big the space is or how adult the space is. It's really kind of making it your own.
Yeah.
Cocoon.
And you can afford art under,
absolutely.
You don't have to buy art for 100K, even for 10K, even for 5K. You can find works for under £1,000.
Yeah. And so again, that's a really good point that you're making. Actually, one of the other ideas with newcube, which we're still really abiding by, is that all the works are under $10,000. Not to say that 10,000 is not a lot of money. It is. Last time I checked, the average was right under 5,000. So we do have some works that are closer to 10, but everything else is, on average, below $5,000. And so having worked at Christie's and ArtNet and all those big names of places, a lot of my friends who had appetite for art but hadn't really, yet bought art thought that all I was selling were, $1 million pieces or blue chip art, as we call it. And so they felt a little intimidated. And so I had to break that ice and say, well, no, working with young artists, some are very affordable. I do not have a crystal ball to tell you whether these are going to be the next $1 million artist. But because we're really paying attention to the curatorial aspect of newcube, we're hoping that these artists have all the right tools and all the right structure to sort of grow in their market and then hence have their prices also go up. So always keeping in mind this idea of investment, because I think there's nothing bad about it. But really, so I saw also a lot of collectors coming to me for advice because they wanted to either extend their collection or just start collecting. And so that led me to move on to actually what I really love doing up to today, and I've always loved doing, is advising young collectors and also seasoned collectors. So that's where Newcube Advisory came about. And right now we're working on several large projects of advisory where we don't only focus on the emerging artists. We do a lot of primary, secondary, and not necessarily only newcube.art artists. And that's where the structure has, two folds to it. And that's where Newcube Advisory comes to play.
Right. I think, looking at Newcube and the website and everything that you've built, the artists that you champion on your website and within your marketplace and within your advisory, or I guess the ones that you have on your website is the marketplace separate to the advisory.
That's right.
But I think that one word that really comes to mind is taste. And taste is something that just because you spend $3 million on a painting does not mean you have good taste. Taste does not come with money.
Absolutely not.
Taste comes with, number one, I think building your sort of taste comes with years of experience and knowledge, which is why an advisory is so valuable to collectors. Why someone like you who has, over a decade of experience in the art world, in the art market, in really big organizations as well, someone who has that expertise, that eye that you've trained, why that's so valuable. But also taste comes with, and you said earlier, it comes with looking and buying with your eyes and your heart, not your ears, and maybe not even fully your brain.
True.
Not always. You say, yes, I think that the investment part of things is also important. I think that is also a good way to take things into account, but not just investment like this artist is going to be worth millions down the line, but more like this artist is going to continue practicing and I'm supporting their career and investing in their career for the longevity of what I believe is an important person who's contributing to art historical discourse, to the arts landscape, talking about or showing the things that I feel are important to show with their work. Those are the things that define taste, right?
True.
And I think the works that you have on your platform personally, I think for me, they really align with my taste.
But it's interesting that you say this because just recently I was talking to one of the collectors, a dear friend who I'm working with. It's more on the advisory side. It's a pretty large project that I'm very excited about. And I'm not going to name the artist, but she brought the name of an artist that's now represented by Gagosian, a young artist. And she's like, what do you think of her? And, I told her what I knew about the artist. And, taste is also very debatable. It's very subjective. My taste is not necessarily hers, and that's totally fine. Thankfully, actually, the both of us have pretty similar taste. But just to say, she's like, oh, I heard from a friend who's a big collector that this is really the artist I should get. And what do you think? And should we kind of try to talk to the gallery to see if we could get it work? And I was like, sure, I could talk to the gallery. We could kind of see if it fits within our curatorial approach to the collection and all of those things. But inside of me, I kind of felt like she's not really looking at the work because I know what her taste is like, and that's not what she usually gets. But I didn't say anything, and taste can evolve. But then we were having this conversation over the phone, and then we hung up. And then she texted me, and she's like, you know what? I looked at it. I actually don't love it. And so, yes, she's an amazing artist. Yes, she's very talented. Yes, she's got all the tools to become the next big artist. But it's not what I want to have in my collection because I don't love it. I don't really relate to it. And I thought that was so interesting because she finally took a step back and wasn't really biased by what she was hearing from her other collector friends. And she was really trying to get a piece that she liked. even if she can afford it, or even if she thought that this artist would be a great investment, she just didn't go down that line, which I really, really appreciated. So all this to say, when we talk about taste is also something that evolves. And the best way to cultivate your taste is just to be out there, go to as many exhibitions as you can, read as much as you can, really train your eye, as you were saying, attend all the fairs, all the exhibitions, talk to people, meet the artists, do artist studio visits, build a network in the art world. I don't know, start getting on the board or like friends of a museum, and so that you get to see their approach to that. All of this really shapes your taste. And I guess that's really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great piece of advice for people who want to collect or advise or run a gallery. It's a really, really great piece of advice, I think, for any arts professional out there, because I think that is part and parcel of, I've used that twice in this episode. I never say it's part and parcel, and I've said that twice already in the last like half an hour, but it's part of working in the art world in general. People are going to want your opinion as well. I mean, depending on what you do, but if you work at an auction house, at a gallery, if you work as an advisor, if you work, goodness, anywhere really, other than, I guess, anywhere in the commercial art world, should I say, because that's where you're involved with collectors.
So, linking into what you and I were talking about earlier, I think the time that I spent working at Christie's and quote unquote on like bigger corporations really sort of helped shape the way I do art advisory right now and the way I work with artists as well. So we talked about due diligence, so that was one big part of it. But also, I think with art advisory, you want to guide your clients or the artists when it comes to, let's say, advisory to collectors. You want to guide them. You also want to make sure that they know of some of the artists that they may have not known about. But also, it's not only about adding an artist just because it's that artist. It's making sure that you use your network, you use your contacts within the art industry to get them the best work by that artist. The best work also that goes within the curatorial approach to their collection. So that's the tricky part of an art advisor. And a lot of people say, why do I need an art advisor? Yes, sure. If you want to buy a one-off piece that you want to hang above your couch, you don't need me or you don't need any advisor. But if you're kind of looking to do a little bit of a deeper dive into art collecting, then you kind of need someone to guide you and to make sure that not only due diligence is done properly, but also that you're getting by the best artists out there. And that, as you know, requires contacts, networks, relationships, sometimes relationships that take a long time to get to the point where you can actually get access to an artist because you're, the 20th person on that list. And so when you have that relationship, it kind of helps you to get access. So all those things are important.
Yeah. I mean, having worked in commercial art galleries, I've done what's called an interest list. And I mean, auction houses also do interest lists, right? They look a little bit different too, because I've worked in both auction houses and galleries, and they look a little bit different. Interest lists at auction houses, you compile interest for the different lots, and it's the highest bidder ultimately that wins. So it's different to a gallery, which is where the gallery team, quote unquote, places an artwork.
That's right.
Which is something that a couple of people, I was speaking to an arts professional the other day. And well, actually, I was speaking to someone who's not an arts professional. They're a writer. They're outside of the arts. To a certain extent, I mean, writing is still the cultural and creative industry, but it is a little bit different to like working in the fine arts sector, right? And they were saying, I don't really understand this whole quote unquote, like placing an artwork. What is that? And I was like, well, actually, I'm here to sort of defend that a bit, because when you have an artist where, as you say, 5 to 10 people realistically are all wanting one specific work, and that is the case for then like the majority of the works in the show, of course, it's going to be the gallery's responsibility to make sure that it lands in a collection that, number one, might really help the artist's career. That's just smart business, and it's just smart to support the artist.
That's true.
Also, number two, to make sure that it goes to someone who's not going to turn around and put it into an auction to try and make more money. That's called flipping an artwork. Mm-hmm. And so doing something like that, it's also having to have those relationships to be like, okay, this advisor is trustworthy. And that takes a long time to build that relationship for the gallerist to look at the advisor and say, I know this advisor, we have a good relationship. Their client is not going to go and turn around and flip the artwork. It really is a deeper relationship sort of situation to be able to gain access to these artworks, because an artist isn't, an art making machine that just pumps out artwork after artwork. That wouldn't be really, that's not what the art world is. It's not like a product that you can buy and you should just be able to buy whatever art you it is sometimes difficult to get your hands on, as you say, the best work.
That's right. But it's interesting that you say this because in a way that is actually one of the main differences between newcube.art, where we work with young artists, and Newcube Advisory. So Newcube Advisory, I want to say, is more of a traditional advisory. We don't have a lot of clients, it's a small advisory. But when it comes to newcube.art, one of the ideas also was to make art accessible to everybody. So in a way, that's a little different. In the Newcube Advisory, we appreciate the fact that we may have to be on a certain list and wait for the best work to come around. And that's fine. For newcube.art, when we work with young artists and we are trying to remove these barriers to entry in the art world, the idea is that whoever comes about, we obviously do our due diligence. We make sure that they're not going to, flip the work, as you say, or anything like that. But we kind of want to have anybody be able to buy their first artwork on newcube.art, or if it's not their first one, but, they appreciate an artist, and we'd love for them to have that artist. And at the same time, we also sometimes proactively place works by these artists in more prominent collections. But we really want these new collectors, young people, or not in age necessarily, anybody. So the idea really is to make it fair, purposeful, insightful. And so also on that point, one thing that was very important to me, and because in a way, COVID kind of helped shape Newcube quite a lot. And again, everyone's sitting at home, artist studio visits aren't possible anymore. So we really wanted our website with the marketplace to have as many assets and access to the artists as we could. So anyone can go on the website, and if they have interest in a particular artist, they can very easily, by just clicking on a button, make an appointment to see the artist virtually, have a studio visit with the artist. Now, if they want to, we can also obviously arrange for physical studio visit, but also we would have a lot of insights into who the artist is, videos, biographies, CVs, really make sure that there is a holistic approach to who the artist is and not forget that they're a human being before being an artist.
Yeah. It's also, I have to say, when thinking about a business model and thinking about what that money is used for when it comes to art sales, with a gallery, you have to cover your overheads too.
That's right.
So there is a different approach to these things, and there's more flexibility with newcube.art because of what you've been able to do in terms of, building that platform without having a brick and mortar space, which, to situate us a little bit right now, we're recording together in New York City. It's May, right? This episode is going to come out later in the year, but it's like art fair week, auction week is next week. There's a lot going on in the city right now, which is why you're here too. Right. And you're going to be having a stand at Future Fair.
Yep.
Which is where you and I are going to be talking on a panel later this week as well. So, it's really quite exciting. But the reason why I'm saying all of this is because typically there's this thought of having a brick and mortar gallery space does legitimize you to a certain extent. It is easier to get into some art fairs when you have a physical space. But that's not to say that it's not possible to be able to have a stand and be able to have these physical spaces, even if you yourself, if your business, your art business doesn't have that traditional space like with the gallery model.
I think, yes, that was a choice I made from the beginning because I have a lot of friends who are in the gallery world, and those who have physical galleries have always, unfortunately, they've had to make, sometimes, not always, but sometimes they've had to make decisions that are not based on quality necessarily, but more geared towards making sure that they at least break even, if not make a profit. And so in a way, not to say, obviously in an ideal world, everyone should be able to see the work that they're buying and be able to kind of go into a gallery and all of that. But my perspective on things was like, I would rather help the artist. And so the commission we would take is much less than a gallery. We're very transparent about it. If for newcube.art, as opposed to a gallery who usually takes 50%, with newcube.art, we take 35%. And the artwork stays with the artist until it's sold. And so that kind of gives also a lot of flexibility to the artist, really aim to be very collaborative. So we take some works on consignment, but if the artist has an opportunity to exhibit this anywhere else physically, we are very flexible to making that happen. And if they want us, we talk to the gallery or the museum or the institution that is going to exhibit it to kind of facilitate the process. Really something that was very important to us. we'll take less. We want the artist to make the most out of their work, but we cannot have a physical space. We can't, at the beginning, we couldn't afford to have a physical space. And right now it's really truly a choice of not having a physical space. And then we have the girls at Future Fair who are absolutely amazing. And their idea was actually very much in line with our idea to make it accessible, to give access to maybe alternative platforms like ourselves with newcube.art. And so it's been really great to see that happen. And I think things are shifting a little bit. You see more and more spaces that don't have a permanent, galleries that don't have a permanent space at different fairs around the world. So I think there's a shift happening, which can only be positive for the ecosystem.
And I just want to get into the practicalities of things a little bit. And I want to speak about your role, as founder. What are some of your responsibilities in running newcube? What does your day-to-day look like in your job?
So things have shifted a lot in the past few years. Today, the way it works is I try to really split my time between the work I do with artists and the work I do with the collectors on the advisory side. Sometimes we have projects coming on either side of them that kind of make me work more on one side than the other, but I try to be even. With the artists, and again, things have shifted a lot. I used to have like weekly meetups with the artists and very quickly turned out to be impossible. But now I have check-ins with them whenever they feel like it. So I'm always accessible if they have a question, if they need me to run over a contract that they received or anything, I'm always there. So I try to be mindful of like keeping my weekends for myself. But, the artists are kind of all over the place with different time zones. And so I try to be as flexible as I can with that. And then we had for a couple of years, someone who became a close friend, Claire, work with Future for a couple of years. She's actually based in London. And so she moved back to her full-time job a couple months ago now. We're still very close friends, but she was really helping a lot with the day-to-day of newcube. And it was great to have someone who's based in London for a couple of years. Now that Claire is more focused on her day job, I'd say I was part of a mentorship for female entrepreneurs 2 years ago, and I met a wonderful mentor there who has no background in art, has an interest in the creative world, but she's not in the contemporary art world at all. But she comes from the banking and finance world. And she has really helped me so much in taking, I'd say, newcube to the next level, because I'm not an artist at all, but I guess I have a creative mind. And as much as I also think I have maybe a bit of entrepreneurship in me, I'm not a finance person. And so she came in and helped us make it an actual business in the sense that now we're looking at numbers, we're looking at goals, things have become, I'd say, more serious in the past 15 months. And so that's been really, really great to see that shift happen.
What was that mentorship scheme that you were a part of? Because I think, number one, I'm asking from a selfish point of view, because I honestly, especially lately, having just gone into being freelance / slight entrepreneurship with the things that I'm doing, I feel like I'm floundering a bit and I need more of that. And so I was going to look into getting a mentor. But also, I get asked this quite often, like, what sort of mentorship structures are out there? And also, do you pay to be a part of a mentorship scheme, or is this a volunteer thing? Can you just ask someone to be your mentor? How does that work?
Oh, I love that. I've really tried a lot to let the word out that having a mentor is so key. And so I'll talk to you about the entrepreneurial forum that I was mentioning. So that was called EF, so Entrepreneur Forum.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be tied to MIT in Boston. And so it was really to kind of fill a gap in helping the female entrepreneurs in different industries to get mentorship from different people in different industries. And so there's a lot of professional mentors and a lot of professionals that come in that are linked to VCs or angel investors that come in. And so they not only help all these female founders with practical skills, but also with networking, with connections. And for those who are trying to raise funds, then obviously that's the place to be.
Well, I think the statistic is that I think only 2% of VC funding goes to female entrepreneurs.
That's right. And I guess that is still the percentage. It's quite sad, right? But I think that's what they tried to change. And so a lot of these VCs were actually VCs that were focusing only on female founders. It's interesting, I say this, being tied to MIT and Boston, turns out that a lot of the people who were accepted into this, you had to apply, and there was a selection process and all of that. So I was very happy to be a part of it. But I'd say I think about 20 women, and 18 of us were in the healthcare industry, somewhat directly or indirectly. So myself and another lady who was part of it, we were the only two that were in the creative world. I was obviously, art related, and she was more in the food and beverage approach, but with some cultural aspect to it. But anyway, so what I realized from that is that I'm not looking to raise funds. That's not what I want to do. So it felt a little counterproductive in the beginning, but I think that was really helpful in understanding where I want to take newcube. Obviously, I would love for newcube to be taken to the next step every year, but I'm not looking to, this has been bootstrapping from the beginning. And obviously, the idea of doing this is to have as many collectors and grow the marketplace, but it remains a small business. So that's been really great. But when it comes to mentorship, and so that's where I met Kavya through that program, and she's, been sticking to newcube since and has really helped a lot. But you could be part of different organizations. So I'm part of the Art Table here in New York, which is also women in the art world. It's sort of very similar to what you do.
I need to write all this down.
Yeah. But you have a first, what's the way to say it? You're working with Next Gen at Awita. So you know exactly how things work that way. So I would say Art Table is a little bit like Awita in a way. And there they have a mentorship program. So I'm really lucky to also myself be able to pass this along to other mentees. And so I'm a mentor, and I work with different people from universities here in New York or in the US who need guidance. And so I think it's so important. And what I always say is, guys, don't be scared of asking people for help.
Yeah.
And my other piece of advice, people love to talk about themselves. I always say this. Don't be afraid to go to someone that you look up to and ask them, you know what? I just love what you do, whoever you are. I love what you do. And I just want to take half an hour of your time to just learn about what has brought you where you are right now. And that is so valuable. And unless sometimes they're not very nice and they're like, I don't have time or whatever. But usually people love that. And what's half an hour? And you could do it now on Zoom. I mean, it doesn't really need to be anything that takes too much of your time. So I've really encouraged everybody who wants to be in the art world at any capacity to just go out, make a list of people you want to talk to, and just reach out to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is really, really important. And I feel like, I was a part of this mentorship program back in, I think it was like 2021. And I remember I had a mentor, her name's Claudia Bachinger, and she also wasn't in the arts at all. She had a very different background, but it was thinking a lot about entrepreneurship and events and things like that. She was the person that inspired me and showed me how to put together an event proposal, how to look for funding for an event.
Right.
And that's what caused me to do the All About Art Careers and Networking conference that I did back in 2024, so last year in April, which was one of the biggest events I've ever pulled off, independently organized by me. Finding chairs is the bane of my existence. That was one of the biggest things. But, I got a venue that gave me the place in kind. I could use the gallery for a day. I was at Bernstein Bhattacharjee Gallery in London on Berners Street. Had a bunch of panelists, was able to pay my panelists.
That's amazing.
Not a lot, but I was still able to pay every single one of my panelists. I had volunteers who I also paid a little tiny bit, but still I was able to pay. I wish I could pay fairly. But at the same time, I then provided some mentorship and some advice, and I am connected to every single one of the people who helped me through that, time. I facilitated jobs. I've facilitated other things for these people, right? So hopefully I've given my time and love and support to them because they've given theirs to my projects. But basically, so I did this conference, and that's what caught Awita's eye. So that's why I got approached to launch Next Gen with Awita. That's why Sigrid Kirk looked at what I was doing and thought, this person is who we need to do this initiative. Because
I'm so excited to see everything you'll be doing with that. It's really great. And if I may, I would really encourage a lot of people in the art world to kind of talk to you, because you've also done so much and you've kind of approached the art world from different angles. And I think that's just so valuable. It's really nice to have people who are really making an impact in this art world, and we're really genuine. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
That's the way to do it. And your name is out there. People know of you. And the more you do that, the more they will know of you, and they'll trust you, and they will see an opportunity for themselves to also collaborate with you. And that really is also one thing that I've seen shift a little bit, but that I was really trying to have a little bit of a positive impact on, is making this art world a little more collaborative, honestly. I mean, we hear all these stories of like this gallery and this gallery are merging and this big blue chip gallery is supporting this young gallery. And so that's great. There's collaboration happening as long as it's healthy collaboration. It's so important. And it could be with like galleries helping each other, artists coming together to have artist run spaces or anything like that. Or different entrepreneurs like you and I see like what we're doing now. We've like come up with different ideas after we met of like, what can we do together to
it's so much fun.
Yeah, and it's
because I get to sit and learn.
Yeah, it's just like like-minded people who have like the same passion for the arts come together. It can only be a positive thing coming out of it, So yeah, I would really encourage that collaborative aspect and at all different levels of the art world.
Yeah, I think we digress, don't we? And I will get back on track here in a minute. But I do really believe that like having these open conversations, especially about entrepreneurship in the arts, is so important because that's where I do foresee a lot of people going when they want to work in the industry. And I think a lot of people, if they see it as an opportunity, that they will be able to do it. Because, yeah, I mean, gosh, I worked full-time for the last few years as I was doing these projects. And only recently was I able to go off. And, you mentioned bootstrapping. And I think, thinking about entrepreneurship in the sense that like, you don't have to do all or nothing and go for broke right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes time to sort of develop and go in the direction and figure out, you probably went through a lot of different iterations with newcube before you landed on what works, right? That is what entrepreneurship is. And I think it's also incredibly isolating. I was talking to my mom the other day and I was like, I just feel sometimes really lonely.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough part. But that's where you want to be able to, things like Awita or Art Table, or I forgot to mention another program I'm part of that newly launched, you probably heard of, is Art Market Mentors.
Yeah. Are you a mentor?
Yes, I am the mentor.
Oh, whoever gets you is going to be so lucky. I almost applied to be a mentee and then I think I like missed the deadline and I was like,
oh, I'm sure that a different application coming up. But it's interesting because like the mentee that I was connected with, actually, I had this preconception idea that maybe the mentees are just really junior people, but no, it happens. This person I've known, actually, we used to be colleagues at Christie's. And she's really senior at Christie's, but she just wants a shift in her career. And so she's looking to kind of move over a little bit to the entrepreneurial approach to art. And that's why and how we were connected, And so it's really interesting to see that. But yeah, entrepreneurship can feel very lonely. It can sometimes feel like, you're working long hours and you don't necessarily see the immediate return. But I truly believe that perseverance really helps, and network. I mean, I always say, I don't need 100 clients. I really don't need 100 collectors to work with me on the advisory side, or I don't need 100 artists to be able to have newcube.art kind of get to where it should be. You just need quality people, and you just need serious people, and you just need to build those strong relationships and know how to maintain them and know how to trust people and how to be trusted, really. It's a small world, so if you do anything, if you have any misstep, people will know, trust me. So you better be ethical in the way you work. We've heard so many horror stories lately. You don't want to get there. Just, my advice is to always remain ethical and true to yourself.
Yeah, word does travel and reputation is very important. That is one of the things that you will really need to be aware of just as you go throughout your career. And I do have a question on my list that is something that we've sort of already covered. I asked you about your art market expertise and developing your eye and discovering new talent and taste, which we've sort of already talked about.
Right.
So I want to ask you my penultimate question, which is, how you work. You work with artists on the one hand and with collectors on the other. This is something that you and I have now talked about a little bit more in depth on this episode together. And so my question has 3 prongs. And again, more from a practical angle. Firstly, what are the steps that you take to get an artist on your platform? Secondly, how do you go about attracting collectors? And thirdly, how does the merging of the two take place with newcube?
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. I'll try to make it short. So initially, when launching newcube, I had a couple artists that I had been watching. And so I told them, was very honest about the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing, but I want to do this. And these are the values that I have in mind. These are the goals that I'm trying to reach. Would you be up to collaborate? And it's not like, they're not working for me. I'm not working for them. We're collaborating. It's a partnership that we're sort of doing. And so I had long conversations with them. And it was interesting because, I thought it'd be so easy to convince them to have like a new avenue to sell their works and advertise their works as artists. This is 2019, 2020. A lot of them were still quite resisting the idea of having everything online. So I had to come up with data and let them know. And thankfully, to my experience, at Christie's and ArtNet, I did have some actual data in hand to sort of say how helpful it is to have transparency in terms of pricing, how helpful it is to actually add the online avenue as not the only way to sell your works, but as an additional avenue. And so there was that. I didn't think I had to convince artists. And so I realized it takes some convincing, and they were asking really valuable questions too. And so I was also rethinking a lot of how to shape the business based on what their expectations and what their needs were. So, and one thing I learned along the way is that I shouldn't rush when it comes to newcube.art and the selection of artists and selection of artworks. I shouldn't rush. It's really quality over quantity, and not only quality of works, but quality of relationships. If for whatever reason there is no trust on either side of this, it's not going to work. And you have a lot of amazing, talented artists who are just not looking for that. So you just want to make sure that this is really done properly, that conversations are happening, that there's a relationship before we sort of commit to a partnership. It's like any relationship, I'd say. Don't rush into it. But when it comes to collectors, in a way it's different, but also, pretty similar. It's all relationship based. It's all trusting based. And it's a lot of networking. I've had this thing. I've had my father sometimes ask me, like, why do you have to go to the other side of the world to attend this fair? I'm like, well, it's just, first of all, you want to be out there. You want to meet new people. You want to expand your network. And it might not pay off right there. But then, people see you, you see things that you are not going to see. For example, I was in Seoul last year for my first time in Korea. It was so far, really decided kind of last minute that I wanted to be there. In the end, it actually made me meet so many new people, so many new artists, a lot of new curators, and it really expanded my network. And a lot of opportunities came out of there, things that I wasn't expecting. And so with collectors, that's how you should do. It's really kind of building, again, friendships.
Bibi, I am going to end the episode shortly. I just have one final question to ask you, and it's a fun question to end the episode that I like to ask all of my guests. If you could pick one artist, or actually pick anyone from art history, it doesn't necessarily have to be an artist.
Okay.
But if you could pick someone from art history to have dinner with, who would it be and why?
So I would say I was recently in Madrid, and I went into this small museum. I don't remember the name, forgive me, but they had an exhibition on surrealism, and I've been really drawn to surrealism lately. And also it's so interesting to see how a lot of the female surrealists have been rediscovered lately. And so I came across Dorothea Tanning's work. And, I obviously heard of her, but I never really knew so much about her. I had no idea of her links with Max Ernst. I had no idea she was married to Max Ernst. I had no idea Peggy Guggenheim was so close to her. And
Max Ernst and Peggy were also a thing as well.
The funny part to that is that actually Peggy, who was with Max Ernst, she encouraged Max Ernst to visit Dorothea Tanning's studio for an exhibition that was happening, I think, in Paris at the time. And so, but at the time she was with Max Ernst. But that's how Max Ernst met his next wife, Dorothea Tanning. So actually his ex-wife introduced them. Funny. That's a little anecdote. But all this to say, I thought Dorothea Tanning was like, just reading a little bit about her and like looking a little more into her works, I found her work fascinating. And I had no idea, but she lived over 100 years. She was born, I think, in 1910 and passed away in 2012. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's around those years. So, I mean, imagine, she's seen it all. She's seen 2 world wars, and she's just seen so much happen in the art world. And so I think if I could meet with her over dinner, I think I'd have a lot to learn from her. And another thing that also I didn't know I learned recently is that she really started as a surrealist artist, But then towards the end of her life, she was actually more of a writer and a poet. And in between, she actually turned towards abstraction. So we're talking about abstraction in the 60s.
Yeah. There's a work in the MoMA that I recently saw, and I was like really drawn to it. And I was like, who is this artist? And I looked, and it was Dorothea Tanning.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, exactly. So I've just been kind of fanning over her recently. The work that I saw in Madrid that kind of started all of this research on my end was a really seminal work of hers that's called Birthday. And then I learned that actually Max Ernst helped her name that piece Birthday because she really uses a lot of doors in her works. And the doors are really this idea of like transitioning from one phase to another in your life. And so like the before and after. And so for him, that work was like the work that made her who she is. So that's why he suggested for her to call it Birthday. I think that work is actually a part of the collection in Philadelphia. So yeah, it's a work that was acquired in 1999 by the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So really interesting to kind of learn more about her. And I think she'd be a really fun woman to have a drink with and talk about all the gossip in the art world.
Oh, yeah. I think, okay, so you can go to dinner with Dorothea Tanning, and I will sit next to you and go to dinner with Leonora Carrington. And then we will...
fun. I'm sure they were friends. I mean, same group.
Same time, same, yeah. I'm pretty sure they were all quite connected. Like Leonora Carrington, Dorothea Tanning,
Leonor
Feeney, Max Ernst. You know, it was all, I remember that, you know, the Surrealism and Magic show curated by Grzina Subolite back in 2022 during the Venice Biennale, curated by Cecilia Alemani, The Milk of Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Cecilia Alemani is also the curator of the High Line, public art. There's so many connections here.
And she's great. She's always at Future Fair too, which I love.
Oh, great. Okay.
I see her.
I think that, you know, what she did with The Milk of Dreams was great. But the Surrealism and Magic show that Grzina, who's a friend of mine, that she curated, that just reignited my love for surrealism. So I really understand how, like, you know, you going to Madrid, you said, and like exploring that and engaging with that can reignite your love. But great, Bibi, thank you so much. That concludes all my questions.
That was fun. Thank you, Alexandra.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.